Okay, so I'm beginning. Can you hear me? Am I loud enough? Okay. So I'm going to start because I can't resist once again saying that the Torah can be read like a novel. And it has foreshadowing and the sort of thing where, the mystery writer has to put the gun in place that's going to be used in the murder X number of pages later. So the last Parashat ended with the commandments about having fringes on the corner of the garments, quote, to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God. I, the Eternal, am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. And this particular line, to have these fringes so that you will not go off after the lusts of your heart or what catches your eye. And then that's the very last lines of the Parsha, that section. And from there, just let me change my view because it's making me crazy here. Hang on. Can't figure this out. Give me a second. Yeah, all right. Okay. From there, we go right on to Korah, which is all about the lusts of the heart. Okay. Immediately. I mean, exactly, which I sort of hadn't, again and again, every time I read it, something else, will pop out. So as the Parsha opens, as probably everybody in this room knows this Parsha perfectly well, Korah is standing with Dathan and Abiram and On, the only time we see his name, and 250 others who are described as, this is a quote, chieftains of the congregation, prominent ones of the assembly, people of repute. And they challenge Moses and Aaron with these words, as if Moses and Aaron had chosen to be the leaders, which they have not. They have been appointed by God, much against, as we know, Moses' desires. And they say, you have much, because all of the congregation, all of them are holy, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is among them. And why do you raise yourself up over Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's community? Much as, in fact, Aaron and Miriam have said to Moses a little way back, to Moses, 2 Parshas back. Anyway, Korah is a great-grandson of Levi, one of Jacob's 12 sons, just as Moses and Aaron are great-grandsons of Levi. Their fathers, I just lost their name, Amram and Issachar, are brothers. So Moses and Aaron are first cousins to Korah. And Korah has already been honored. His group, his clan, has been given responsibility for taking care of everything that goes on within the tent of meeting, within the Mishkan. But it is, as far as the text is clear, although he's already been honored, Korah wants to be more and feels he should be high priest instead of Aaron. He wants to be the one who will be the conduit between God and the community. And he believes he should be, as far as we know from the text. So Moses responds by telling him to come with his 250, respectable men the next day to light incense pans at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And we know, again, reading this novelistically, we know from the deaths of Aaron's 2 eldest sons that if you light the incense pans in a way that is not really what God wants, you're going to be consumed by fire. But Korah accepts the challenge along with his 250 men. So presumably they are actually believing that they should be in the position, or that Korah should be in the position that Aaron is. And then Moses turns to Dathan and Abiram because he treats them separately. And they are the great-grandsons of Reuben, who was Levi's firstborn. So they, as far as the text is concerned, it is assumed that they feel that they have the right as descendants of the firstborn to be in the position of leadership that normally goes to the firstborn. But when Moses approaches them, they absolutely refuse to speak to him. And what they say is, we won't come up and talk to you. Is it a small thing that you brought us up from a land flowing with milk and honey, Egypt, to kill us in the wilderness, that you lord it over us as well? Besides, you haven't even brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey, or given us possession of a field or a vineyard. Will you put out those people's eyes? We won't come up. So Moses turns away from them. And we go then to the next day, basically. And the next day, the Korah and his group, the 250, stand themselves in front of the tent of meeting with their incense pans. And Moses goes up to Dathan and Abiram and says, separate, move away, everybody, move away from them, move away from the rebels, just everybody. And then he says, what's going to happen next isn't my doing. It's going to be something that's completely out of the range of what I can do myself. If the earth should open up, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't, this is, and similarly, the assumption is, he's not even looking at Korah and the 250 at the tent of meeting, because this is all between God and them. They're going to light the incense pans. Whatever happens then is between God and them. And Moses is saying as clearly as he can, it's all God's doing here, okay? And then the earth opens up, and Abiram and Dathan, just with all of their families and everything they own, their oxen, their slaves, their possessions, everything, just go right down to Sheol. They're swallowed by the earth. And at the same time, or a little before that, the text says, the 250 men in Korah have been consumed by fire, which is now burning everywhere. And they all go down. They also go down. The earth swallows them. That's sort of the understanding. And that's pretty much the end of the Parashat. I mean, there's other stuff in there, but this is what I wanted to talk about. And I wanted to bring it, first of all, into today, because this time I read the Parashat and I couldn't believe I had never noticed this before. So Korah wants to change the power structure in the religious portion of it. He wants to be the one who's the conduit between God and the congregation, the whole community. We don't know what he truly thinks. We don't know if he really believes this. The implication is he probably does, is because he's quite willing to stand there with the incense pans, okay? So he may really believe that he knows the true words of the divine, the spiritual teachings that should be conveyed by the high priest, that he's the one who was called. Whereas Dathan and Abiram are more simply political, wanting to overthrow the existing government structure to put themselves at the top, and capitalizing on the terror the community has of the unknown world in which they find themselves, because they're terrified the whole way, So in this Parashat, a group claiming to know the true word of God aligns with another group that simply wants to overthrow the existing hierarchy, the government. The religious and political movements meld and share their rhetoric. Both movements refer to a past, mythical past in many ways, in fact, that was so much better than the unknown they face now. They're both addressing the yearning for the known over the unknown and changing future. And both use the language of populism, of complaint against a supposed elite, even though they themselves are part of the elite. Why do you raise yourselves above the whole community, they say? You think you're better than the rest of us. And with this language, they bring in everybody else, because the final section after, which I didn't say, after they're all swallowed up by the earth, the entire congregation, everybody, turn on Moses and Aaron and say, you killed them. You did this. How could you do this? When in fact, it's not their doing. So they bring with them into this mixed religious political movement, everybody, a whole lot of people who don't have a lot of power, who really are at the bottom of the power structure or in the middle, but not the ones ruling. So you probably noticed the resemblance to current state of affairs. This is the evangelical component of the MAGA movement, aligned with the respectable Republican Party and the Christian nationalists, and bringing in the whole range of those who feel that they themselves have been deprived by an elite of the respect and power due them. That was basically what I wanted to say, because it really hit me. And it's not just happening here, it's happening in India, it's happening, and it's happened historically again and again when a religious and political group join forces. And it really hit me the more I thought about it this week, of the incredible importance it has been that the Constitution of this country separated church and state. And that has been under attack now for a long time. And this is, in many, perhaps the culmination of it. But what we're seeing now, is what this describes. And it blew me away really reading it this week. And I guess the other thing I just wanted to say, it's not as striking, but a main theme of the Torah is the inability of the Israelites to accept kind of what's actually in front of their eyes as they're facing the unknown. And they continually blame Moses and Aaron, who are not responsible. It's God who said, you got to go out there. And I've generally read this in terms of individual mindfulness and, our inability to accept or have faith. But I wanted to go slightly differently here. So they ignore the experience of Sinai, the pillar of fire, of the cloud, of the manna. They've been complaining as soon as they started marching out in numbers. 3 days later, they were complaining about how they had wonderful food in Egypt. Last week, the scouts went out and they said, as a community, no, we can't do this just because it is a land of milk and honey, but we can't go forward. And when Caleb and Joshua argued, they threatened to stone them. And then we have Korah this week. Again, complaining and saying, all you're doing is in the end, you kill God's people. And you're just bringing us out to die here. So the Torah keeps returning to the inability of the Israelites to see God's presence with them, to see the truth of what's happening as they face the wilderness of the unknown. And that's again where we are now, where a large chunk of our country cannot see what is in front of their eyes. On one hand, whether it's about Biden's election, Trump's criminality, or the fact that our weirding weather is because of man-made climate change, this is right, facts in front of people's eyes and unable to see reality or truth. And finding scapegoats, often of current leaders, and saying, you're responsible for this, you're responsible for all of the immigrants at our borders. It's your fault they're here, when it has to do with, in large part, both crime and climate change in Central America that's forcing people out. And a whole lot of stuff like that. So the whole, and the whole, all sorts of conspiracy theories and stuff like that, when we talk about God, the Torah is talking about the inability to see the presence of God. And as Reconstructionists, when we talk about the presence of God, we talk about life unfolding. And that's what we're seeing. This is the creative process, cause and effect in the creative process unfolding. That's what, say, the immigration is about, or the climate weirding. But instead, to see it in terms of conspiracy theory, someone's responsible, someone's doing this, which is exactly what we're seeing in Torah again and again. And it's the same inability to see, God is known again and again in our prayers as truth, the God of truth. And we're in the middle of this right now as these two forces of religious and political rebellion are aligned. So that's where I wanted to go.